The dinner table was already set when I arrived. White plates, matching cutlery, the kind of setup my mother reserved for occasions she wanted to feel respectable. Nothing about the evening had been announced as special, yet everything about it felt rehearsed, like I was walking into a scene where my role had already been decided. I kissed my mother on the cheek, nodded at my father, and took the seat that had always been mine. Slightly away from the center, close enough to serve, far enough to be ignored. My sister was already talking, her voice light, animated, filling the room the way mine never did. Her laughter bounced easily between the walls. My parents leaned in, engaged, interested. I smiled when appropriate, listened when expected. I had learned how to exist quietly in my own family. Dinner began normally. Small talk, complaints about traffic, a story my father told that everyone had heard before but still laughed at. I chewed slowly, careful not to draw attention to myself. Then the conversation shifted. My mother mentioned an upcoming family gathering, extended relatives, old friends, people who hadn't seen me in years. She spoke about seating, about appearances, about impressions. My father cleared his throat. It was a small sound, casual, almost thoughtful. "Maybe it's best," he said, looking directly at me, "if you keep your face hidden when we're there." The fork froze halfway to my mouth. For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard him correctly. The table went quiet. Not shocked quiet. Comfortable quiet. My mother didn't react. My sister didn't look up. No one asked what he meant. No one laughed it off. No one said my name. Silence wrapped around his words like agreement. I set my fork down carefully. My heart was pounding, but my hands didn't shake. Years of training had taught me how to hold myself, still even when something inside me fractured. "I understand," I said. The words surprised even me. My father nodded, satisfied, as if a difficult topic had been handled efficiently. Conversation resumed immediately. Weather, schedules, logistics. Just like that. No one looked at me. I focused on my plate, suddenly aware of every inch of myself. My posture, my expression, the way my presence occupied space they apparently wished it didn't. I finished my meal in silence. No one noticed when I excused myself early. No one followed. No one asked if I was okay. I drove home with the radio off. At every red light, his sentence replayed in my mind. Not loudly, not cruelly. Calm, reasonable. Delivered the way one might suggest rearranging furniture. As if my face was an inconvenience. As if my existence required adjustment. That night, standing in front of my bathroom mirror, I looked at myself for a long time. I searched for whatever it was they saw, whatever flaw justified silence at the table, whatever made no one speak up. I didn't find it, but I did find something else. Clarity. This hadn't been a joke. It hadn't been concern. And it definitely hadn't been love. It was permission. Permission for them to see me as less. And permission for me to finally stop pretending I belonged where I was tolerated. I turned off the light and walked away from the mirror. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I started planning. Because humiliation, when delivered calmly, doesn't shatter you. It sharpens you. And I was done being invisible. Silence hadn't always been my instinct. It had been learned. Growing up, I was never openly criticized. Not the way movies show it, with shouting or slammed doors. Instead, it was quieter, polite, wrapped in concern and comparison. My father preferred precision over affection. Compliments were rare, corrections were constant. How I stood, how I spoke, how I smiled, always framed as advice. You'd be prettier if you didn't draw so much attention. Try not to laugh too loudly. Stand behind your sister in photos. She photographs better. Each comment landed softly enough to dismiss, but often enough to shape me. My mother never argued with him. She'd smooth things over, redirect, explain. "He means well," she'd say. "You know how he is." I learned early that disagreement created discomfort, and discomfort was something I was expected to avoid. So I adapted. I became agreeable, helpful, easy to manage. When relatives visited, I served tea. When family decisions were made, I listened. When praise was given, it went elsewhere. When criticism arrived, it found me quietly. I told myself it didn't matter. That confidence was loud, and dignity was quiet. By the time I was older, the pattern had solidified. My sister was encouraged to shine, to take up space, to express herself freely. I was encouraged to blend, to smooth edges, to be useful rather than visible. It wasn't jealousy. It was placement. I didn't rebel. I complied. And compliance was rewarded with approval that felt conditional, with affection that required effort. So when my father made that comment at dinner, my body responded before my mind could. Agree. Don't disrupt. Don't make it worse. Silence had kept me safe before. That night, though, something cracked beneath the habit. I replayed the scene in my head, not to hurt myself, but to understand it. The ease with which he'd said it. The lack of resistance from anyone else. The speed at which the moment was buried. It wasn't accidental. It was rehearsed by years of unspoken permission. The next morning, my mother called. Her voice was cheerful, practiced. "Did you get home all right?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "Good. About last night, your father didn't mean it harshly." "I know," I said. "He was just thinking ahead. You know how appearances matter." "I know," I repeated. There was a pause. "You're not upset, are you?" I looked at the wall, at the small crack near the window I'd been meaning to fix. "No," I said. And for the first time, it wasn't a lie, because upset implied surprise. I wasn't surprised anymore. I ended the call and sat quietly, letting the truth settle. This wasn't about one comment. It was about a lifetime of being edited. I thought of photos where I stood at the edge, gatherings where my role was logistical, conversations where my voice was optional. I'd mistaken tolerance for belonging. That realization didn't come with rage. It came with relief, because if I'd never been fully seen, then I hadn't actually lost anything. What I lost was an illusion, and what remained was choice. I didn't know yet what I would do with that choice, but I knew one thing with certainty. I would never agree to erase myself again. I didn't confront my father. I didn't explain myself to my mother. I didn't demand an apology from anyone. Instead, I did something far more unsettling. I changed my behavior. The week after the dinner, I canceled my attendance at the upcoming family gathering. Not dramatically, just a short message in the group chat. "I won't be able to make it. Hope it goes well." No explanation. Within minutes, my phone lit up. Questions, concern, confusion disguised as politeness. My mother called first. "What do you mean you're not coming?" she asked. "I have other plans," I replied. "What plans?" "Personal ones." There was a pause. "You've never skipped these before." "I know." That answer unsettled her. My sister texted next. "Is this about what Dad said?" I waited before responding. It helped me decide, I finally wrote. Her reply came quickly. "You're overreacting." I set my phone down. Overreaction had become their word for discomfort they didn't want to examine. I didn't argue. I simply stopped participating in spaces where my presence was conditional. I declined errands. I stopped volunteering for logistics. I removed myself from conversations where my role was assumed rather than chosen. No announcements, just absence. And absence, I learned, is louder than confrontation. They noticed quickly. My mother began calling more often, checking in, asking questions that circled the real issue without landing on it. "You seem distant," she said one afternoon. "I'm just busy," I replied. My father didn't call at all. That, too, was telling. The family gathering happened without me. I saw the photos online later, group shots, smiling faces, a visible space where I would have stood in the past. No one commented on it publicly, but privately, messages trickled in. "You were missed. It wasn't the same without you." I read them without responding, because being missed wasn't the same as being valued. A week later, my mother invited me over for coffee. I agreed. The house looked the same. The atmosphere didn't. There was a carefulness now, a sense that something fragile had been disturbed. My mother poured coffee, her hand slightly unsteady. "Your father thinks you're punishing us," she said. "I'm not," I replied. "I'm adjusting." She frowned. "To what?" "To reality." She sighed. "You know he didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said again. "That's what hurts." She looked at me, confused. "When something hurts without intention," I continued, "it means it's normal. And normal shouldn't feel like that." She didn't have an answer. Neither did I expect her to. I didn't stay long. As I left, I felt something shift, Not in them, but in me. I wasn't waiting for permission anymore. I was choosing presence where it was earned. That choice didn't bring relief immediately. It brought resistance, but it also brought clarity. And clarity, once found, doesn't disappear. The pressure didn't arrive loudly. It arrived politely. Concern wrapped in gentle voices. Advice disguised as care. Questions that weren't really questions at all. "You seem different lately," my aunt said when she called. "Your mother's worried," a cousin mentioned. "Families say things they don't mean," someone else added, as if intention erased impact. I listened. I nodded. I didn't correct them, because correcting would have required explaining something they were already committed to misunderstanding. Soon, the narrative solidified. I wasn't hurt. I was sensitive. I wasn't distancing myself. I was being dramatic. My father's comment became a joke taken the wrong way. My silence became punishment. My absence became attitude. It was easier for them to adjust the story than to question the system it protected. One afternoon, my mother came over unannounced. She stood in my kitchen, looking around like she was searching for evidence of distress, of instability, of something that justified her concern. "You're isolating yourself," she said finally. "I'm resting," I replied. She shook her head. "That's not healthy." "What wasn't healthy," I said calmly, was pretending I didn't hear what I heard. Her expression tightened. "You're letting one comment define everything." "It didn't define it," I said. "It revealed it." She opened her mouth, then closed it. "You know your father struggles with words," she said instead. "I know," I replied. "I've been translating them my whole life." Her shoulders sagged. "What do you want us to do?" I thought about that. "I want acknowledgement," I said. "Not excuses, not reframing. Just acknowledgement." She nodded slowly, but her eyes drifted away. "That's difficult for him." "I know," I said again. Difficult had always been my responsibility. That evening, I received a message from my sister. "People are talking. You're making this bigger than it needs to be." I stared at the screen. They weren't afraid of the truth spreading. They were afraid of control slipping. I typed back. I didn't make it public. I stepped back. Her response came seconds later. "You know how Dad is. Why push him?" I didn't reply, because pushing implies force. I had done the opposite. I had removed myself from impact. A few days later, I learned my father had told relatives I was going through something and needed space. It wasn't untrue, but it wasn't complete. He framed my clarity as fragility. That hurt more than the original comment. Not because it was cruel, but because it was strategic. By making me the problem, he avoided being examined. I realized then that confrontation would have changed nothing. They weren't listening. They were managing. That night, I sat alone, replaying the dinner one last time, not with pain, but with detachment. I saw the table clearly now. The silence, the comfort in it, and my agreement, automatic, conditioned, learned. I wasn't angry at myself. I was proud, because I'd finally broken a pattern that had protected everyone except me. The pressure would continue. I knew that, but so would my absence. And absence, when chosen deliberately, becomes a boundary no one can argue with. The consequences didn't explode. They accumulated. Small inconveniences at first. Missed details. Unfilled roles. Things that had always been handled without acknowledgement suddenly required effort. I heard about it in passing. My mother had to coordinate an event herself. My sister complained about how exhausting it was to manage everything alone. My father grew irritated by details he'd never noticed before. No one said my name, but I was there in every gap. And for the first time, I didn't rush to fill it. My days became quieter. Not empty, intentional. I began choosing how I spent my time, which invitations I accepted, which conversations I exited early. I stopped offering help before it was requested. At first, the stillness felt uncomfortable. Then it felt like relief. I realized how much of my energy had gone into maintaining a version of myself that was easier for others to consume. Without that effort, I felt lighter. One afternoon, my mother called again. Her voice was less certain now. "I didn't realize how much you handled," she admitted. I stayed silent. "We're adjusting," she continued. "It's harder than I thought." "I know," I replied. There was a pause. You could still help sometimes. I considered it. Only if I'm asked, I said. And only if I want to. She didn't argue. That felt like progress. Not healing. Not reconciliation. Recognition. I ran into my sister weeks later at a grocery store. We stood in the aisle awkwardly, both holding baskets, unsure how much history to bring into the present. You seem different, she said finally. I am, I replied. She hesitated. Dad thinks you're being stubborn. I smiled slightly. He's allowed to think that. She studied my face, like she was seeing it clearly for the first time. I didn't know it hurt you that much, she said. It didn't start that night, I replied. It ended. She nodded slowly. That mattered. I didn't return to family dinners right away. I didn't need to. I was learning how to exist without shrinking. I took a class I postponed for years. I spent evenings alone without apologizing for them. I learned how to enjoy my own presence without waiting to be included. The family didn't fall apart without me. They adjusted. And so did I. Time did what distance alone couldn't. It softened the noise. Not by erasing what happened, but by placing it where it belonged, behind me, no longer defining every step forward. I didn't stop loving my family. I stopped asking them to love me in a way they weren't willing to learn. That difference mattered. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Conversations became less tense, not because everything was resolved, but because expectations had changed. When I showed up now, it was on my terms. When I stayed away, no one chased me. That, too, was clarity. One evening, my father called. It was unexpected. We hadn't spoken directly since the dinner. His voice sounded the same, measured, controlled, familiar. Your mother says you've been distant, he said. I've been intentional, I replied. There was a pause. You know I didn't mean to embarrass you. I closed my eyes, steadying myself. I know, I said. But you did. Another pause. I was trying to protect the family image, he added. I understand, I replied. I just won't be sacrificed for it. He didn't respond right away. I suppose we all have blind spots, he said finally. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't dismissal either. That was as close as he could come, and for the first time, I accepted that without resentment. Later, my mother hugged me a little longer than usual. My sister stopped making comments about how I looked, how I spoke, how I carried myself. None of it was dramatic. None of it was complete. But it was enough, because I had changed. I no longer shrank to fit their comfort. I no longer edited myself to maintain peace. I took up space, quietly, steadily, unapologetically. I realized something important in the months that followed. Humiliation doesn't always come from cruelty. Sometimes it comes from familiarity, from people who think they know you, so well they forget you're human. The dinner where my father told me to hide my face wasn't the worst moment of my life. It was the clearest. It showed me who I'd been trying to impress, and who I no longer needed permission from. I stand differently now. I speak when I want to. I leave when I'm done. And when I look in the mirror, I don't search for flaws that justify silence. I see someone who survived being overlooked and chose visibility anyway. I didn't disappear from my family. I stopped disappearing within it, and that made all the difference.